Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. My name's Walter Jennings, and I'm coming to you from Hong Kong. Sorry, I'm not able to join you live there in Lithuania, and I hope you're enjoying the event. So far, it's been a very active couple of days. I've certainly learned a lot, and I hope you have too. Now, the title of my session is Engaging Global Influencers, and I'll be talking about the way to use international KOLs not for products and not in a B2C environment, but more in a B2B environment. And this is based on experience I had working at Huawei in their global headquarters in Shenzhen, where I started and ran their international KOL program for 3 years and had a really interesting experience. And I'd like to share some of my observations and learnings. So without further ado, it isn't a meeting unless someone shares a PowerPoint. So let's get started. If you have any problems or you can't get to the slides or I'm doing anything wrong, I am looking in the chat on the side. I don't have the Q&A open, but if you have any questions or if there are any problems, please let me know in that. So as introduction, I'm Walter Jennings, and from my accent, I don't think you can ever lose your accent. I was born in the US and started my career in New York, and had most of my career worked in agencies. I worked first in New York, and Edelman moved me down to Sydney, Australia, where I met and married my spouse. And then we traveled a little bit further afield and came to Hong Kong for the first time. And then wound up at my very first in-house role at Ford Motor Credit Company in Detroit. That's a very hard, Control-Alt-Delete, very hard move going from Hong Kong to Detroit. Eventually, I found my way back around the world, and I'm here in Hong Kong, where I'm currently running marketing and communications at a cryptocurrency exchange that is going for SFC licensing. It's a firm called Hashkey Group. And this once again is a very large Chinese technology company. And I'm working with them to make sure that their technology is understood in the West. If you flash back to Hong Kong in the 90s, every company around Europe and the US was coming into China, and I did a lot of work with brands like Coca-Cola, the US State Department, helping them better understand work in China. And now Hong Kong is an exit, so that major Chinese companies looking to do business in the West come here. It's really the West for beginners for China. So I invite you all to come to Hong Kong anytime. You'll find it a great location. So what I want to do is talk through the international KOL program at Huawei. This, one of the things I did practice when there was what I'd call radical transparency. And what I want to do is pretty much answer any question any of you have about Huawei, about working with international KOLs, and see how I can assist you with your programs. So Huawei globally is was founded by Mr. Ren, who is the chairman and CEO of the company. And in November 2015, Mr. Ren said that we should bring people who have a high profile in social media to MWC, and then they could share, or Mobile World Congress, they could share their experiences amongst their audiences. And from that comment, I developed out and built the International KOL program. Our very first event was back in 2016, and we started with 8 KOLs, and then gradually grew that to about 225 in 25 countries. And there were a few differences with our program. Many of you may be engaging KOLs in consumer. where you'll be paying for play. In the Huawei example, we swapped experience for pay. And so I'll talk about that in a little bit more depth. But we really provided these KOLs high-level access to the very top levels of leadership within the company, gave them news as it was being broken to the media and to government, and they felt a step ahead. Plus, if you dial back 5 years, you'll think that Huawei was a less known brand at that time. And to be invited into the world headquarters to get access to their top leadership was absolutely perfect for the KOLs. And that's what you need to think about, which is what is it that you have that key opinion leaders will want, and think beyond money, but think in terms of access or experience. When and if you can hold events again, you'll be able to look to invite some of these influencers to attend some of your events and to look for opportunities to have them, come along and share the experience. At Huawei, we were very specific that these were not paid engagements. However, we did ask people to put in their posts that we paid for their travel and their experiences when visiting either global conferences or coming to Huawei World Headquarters. So we had a lot to choose from when we were trying to find KOLs by geography or by area of expertise. We wound up developing pools of talent, say, that were just in Europe and just in telecommunications, or just in Asia and just in smart city, and across the world developed quite a strong portfolio. A few program limitations. We were working specifically with English language. Later in the program, we were able to add some Spanish language for customers in Europe as well as in Latin America, but we never got a chance to get deeper into multilingual KOL engagement. Here, we were very much working with the largest language online, which is English. And thankfully, I didn't have to look after our work in mainland. So the KOL management and the KOL scene in China is very different again. Not the subject of my talk, but so what are we talking about when we talk about an KOL? So for the program we developed, Huawei back then had media relations already undergoing, as well as government affairs. And so the government relations, the media relations team were looking for ways to expand the influence. And we specifically started working with high-profile commentators who were not journalists, not government, and not with associations, but more independent, perhaps technical analysts or freelance writers. But each of these people had strong connections within their communities. It's interesting when you're trying to find a KOL, don't be fooled by the numbers. There are many influencers who have hundreds of thousands of followers. However, they might not be the right audience and the right engagement for you. So it's a little bit of a challenge in that regard. We worked very well with authors, people who are writing books and researching books about your industry. Specifically, we looked at authors of telecommunications, as well as leadership, as well as China's role in the new world economy. And we were looking at people who published regularly, not just books, but articles in whether that's Medium or the Washington Post or Forbes, Fortune, and the others. So They, one of the lessons I learned was how hard these people work to remain engaged with their audiences. And that's really a great way to determine the success of your program, to see not just what they're putting out, but how well the audience is using the information, talking back to the information, and engaging with these experts. So they're passionate, they're curious, and they're really trying to get high-level access that others can't have. And so when you're looking at using international KOLs or thought leaders in a B2B program, think about the kind of access you can provide, think about the type of content you can offer them that gives them a leg up over their competitors in your industry. So when we look at the difference between, say, influencer engagement or influencer marketing, a lot of the influencer marketing work would be shorter term campaign based and focused around product. Those would be usually influencer marketing, paid campaigns. Whereas when you're looking at, and that has a specific contract with a beginning and end and a period of time in which you're working. Influencer engagement is something you're going to want to look at over a much longer time period, and I'm talking years. And so you're going to want to be careful about the selection of your influencers, because these people should be in your life over a period of over the long term. What's nice about that is that if you think about large B2B sales, these take place over a very long life cycle. So Huawei has three businesses. It's carrier, enterprise, and consumer. Consumer are all the great handsets. Enterprise would be solutions within companies, such as broadcast servers that allow China CCTV, China State Television, to grab any video ever recorded instantly with great search capabilities. And then the carrier work would be the telecommunications underpinning the internet and the telco across your own countries. So those kinds of sales are very, very long. And we were looking for people that were seen as experts in their countries in those areas. So that allowed us to build a deeper relationship and get embedded within their networks. So when we looked at this, and when you look at this, you'll find that you can't do influencer relations in isolation from the other work that you're doing in your company. So there may be contributors that have written about your company and have talked with the folks in media relations. We found influencers at universities and think tanks, and Huawei actually has a group that works with researchers and universities. So there was always a little bit of crossover. You saw people who might be former government ministers who then had a very large role as a consultant to government, and yet these people were known in other areas. So when you begin your search for international KOLs, you may find you've already got relationships with some of them in other comms areas within your corporations. So you'll want to make sure you kind of look as deeply as you can. So no doubt you've got some already. You would find that there are analysts, journalists, government officials who have a fairly high profile in social media, and even look internally. I'm now with a group, Hashkey Group, and one of our professionals in China has about 50,000 followers and is seen as an influencer in digital assets, crypto, and blockchain. So you'll find them. You'll also find, as you look to build a portfolio of global influencers, that in larger markets such as the US, many of the European countries, you will find influencers who are super specialized. As one example, we worked with in Northern Ireland, Dr. Kevin Curran, University of Ulster, and he is a specialist in cybersecurity in telecommunications. When you're in Indonesia or Kenya, you're generally finding either B2C influencers or B2B influencers without quite that much expertise, but you're always going to find those people who might be working with technology startups in the ecosystem and in the environment. We had an early lesson at Huawei, the very first group we took to Mobile World Congress. It took a long time to target and find people who were willing to engage with Huawei and to do so without having had past experience with us. So when you first begin this program, it takes a lot of coaxing and outreach to find people who are willing to work with you, that are interested in you and are wanting to do so for the same reasons you want to work with them, which is that longer term relationship. What we found early is that when we brought our first group abroad to an event, we had an all-male group. And it didn't take long for someone to notice that and to make a comment online about the diversity. And I took the ownership of that issue, saying I had selected and found these people, and we will pay more attention to that going forward. And we worked very hard to make sure that the KOLs we worked with were representative of the customers and the audience that we wanted to engage with. So we had people from around the world. We had people of different ages, obviously different genders, different sexual orientation, different a wide range of diversity in the group. So, and that became important as, again, it reflects the voice of the customer and the people that you're trying to work with. So you'll see here that I've kind of heavy loaded the people with larger followings. Say you're looking at someone like Marsha Collier, who has her books have sold over 7 million copies. She's a radio host, podcaster, and writes about technology. And she, being in LA, gave us inroads to a new audience in the United States, which we hadn't had before. Similarly, we found people in Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, Hong Kong, Sydney, Kenya, Chile, and worked to find a global portfolio. So again, you can find yourself KOLs who are micro-targeted by geography or by capability. So we built the program, and I mentioned earlier that this was an unpaid program, and we really worked to try to find mutual benefits. So yes, with the KOLs, when we took them to an event at that Huawei was sponsoring, say Mobile World Congress, the KOL, in exchange for covering this for the 3 days of the event, would receive business class airfare and a stay in a 5-star hotel, and then a kind of a concierge style service to the event. I'm not sure about you, but when I've attended large scale events with 15 or 30,000 people or even bigger, it's a zoo, and it's very hard to find your way around and to get to the information you want. What we managed to do was to be able to just set up a very bespoke experience. So when they came in, they got immediate access. There were private rooms for them. They were able to sit with top level executives, and then they got good seating at the speeches they wanted to see, the speakers that they wanted to see. And the benefit then for the company is we had new advocates who really understood the business strategy and the goals of Huawei, and it expanded our networks and really gave third-party credibility. What we did find is that every time we did a KOL event, the social media mentions for the company went through the roof, but also the network of people who were following Huawei expanded dramatically. Huawei, prior to the KOL program, didn't have quite the readership and viewership that it should have had in social media, and was failing to make inroads in a lot of the Western countries where it didn't have as big a profile. So when I set up the program, this is going to sound counterintuitive if you work and do a lot of work in China, but we set up the program with a caveat saying it would be radical transparency. And we never asked for editorial control over what people posted. I didn't ask to see stories before they went up. I didn't care to edit the video. I wanted people to share in their voice what they saw, what they heard, and what they experienced. I did have one simple request, which is if you're going to post something that is negative in nature, please do then at least give me an opportunity to discuss it with you first. And it was interesting how the KOLs took a while to adjust to that, I didn't have minimum numbers of posts that had to go out in a day. I said, if you find it interesting, share it. If you don't find it interesting, let us know. But they had been accustomed to a more contracted experience with editorial oversight, with an ability to review posts. And honestly, we didn't want to do that. I did ask for longer form content, maybe over 500 words. If you wanted, we'd be happy to check the quotes or to read it for accuracy, because nobody wants to be wrong, but we wouldn't change the language even when we didn't like the language. One of the observations, again, of Mr. Ren is that public relations should be a mirror that is held up to the organization and reflects back to it what people really think. And so we wanted to hear the good and the positive because, the good and the bad, the good and the positive. We wanted to hear the good and the bad because it helped expand the understanding of the way the world saw Huawei, and it will help you and your product engineers and your customer service people really get a better sense of what the world thinks of your company and the way you engage. So that became that was a very early decision, but it became quite an important decision. So when you're looking at a roadmap, if you want to engage influencers in your own organization, I'll walk you through these 4 steps that we approached and the way we went about it. And perhaps this is a template you can follow in your own organizations or with your own clients. So obviously, the first and most important is, why are you bothering? Why are you doing this? And this very much became a way to support the overall corporate reputation strategy. And really to help create an environment that was positive for the company to do its business. And so this was around a long-term engagement, but it also became a little bit like taking sips of caffeine. Once you've gotten a taste for it, you want a little bit more. And so it did evolve a little bit where it was very powerful for us for social media and building out the understanding of the brand at that corporate level. So be very clear about why you're doing this and how long you'll be doing this. Think about the resources needed to engage this. You'll find that the people who are working with the KOLs, it becomes a very close relationship. And when I finished my contract at Huawei, I didn't renew, and the program itself went through a large transition because I personified a lot of that program. And I think that's a critical error, that you had it tied up with a personality, but think about that. So When we looked at metrics, it was very challenging. I was in San Francisco and I went to the world headquarters of Twitter, and I was asking them about how you measure the impact of the influencers and how many people will see it. So as an example, I asked Twitter how many people will see on average a tweet. We assumed maybe 5 to 10% of the audience followers might see each tweet. And it was interesting, even Twitter at that stage didn't know how to measure the power of what appears on their own platform. I'm sure they've come a long way. But what also occurs, which is really useful, is that ability to hear and listen. So before you begin engaging your influencers, begin thinking about who they are, and listen to them and get a sense of their tone. There are one or two influencers we work with that I wish I had paid more attention to the content they streamed further in advance from when we engaged them. It was a bit challenging to associate yourself with someone who might have had some kind of strong views in the past. So this is not an event. This is an ongoing process. We had events that were kind of on calendars, such as big conferences, major events, and then we had to maintain engagement ongoing using tweet chat, Facebook Live, and socializing content, finding interview opportunities for the KOLs. First off, within your own organization, you probably have KOLs already. We found quite a few that had been former analysts or former journalists, as well as former government ministers. We didn't choose at the KOL program to work with active journalists or employed government officials. You will find that you've got many already within your organization. We used a platform called Clear, K-L-E-A-R. There are many that help you understand and evaluate influencers. I just got accustomed to the platform, and it was very helpful for finding influencers by geography and by area of expertise, as well as by audience size. It's quite interesting now to be working in a firm that is in cryptocurrencies, because the influencer field is very large and very fractured and very unique. But again, think long and hard about how well connected the people are with their audiences, and look at the style of their writing and their frequency. At Huawei, it was a conservative organization that didn't care for strong people with very strong vocal opinions that were sometimes negative, sometimes positive. So we found folks that had a more even approach, and it was a lot less, a lot more positive than we ever expected. But I'll come back to that. So when you want to select influencers, you want to find people you want to do business with. So it's important to think about the audience that you're trying to reach with the international KOLs. So you want them to have connections with your important audiences and to be in the geographies. They should have links back to the business in terms of their expertise. Get a sense for the style and tone and frequency of their commentary, and also what I'd call resonance, which is how many people would write back and how that influencer worked with them. I'll give you a great example. There's a woman, Tamara McCleary. She's in Colorado. She is listed as one of the most influential people in technology. And I have never seen someone work so hard and remain so well connected with their audience that literally there's barely a comment that goes by on some of her posts that she isn't talking back to the audience. And while she has hundreds of thousands of followers, many of them she knows because she's been talking with them for so long. So Again, think about not just people who have a great number of posts, but how many people are really reading, engaging, and commenting on this, how much is shared, and what's the resonance like. So reach, relevance, and resonance would be the three ways to evaluate a potential KOL. So ways to work with them once you've found them. Look, this was a global program led out of the world headquarters for Huawei in Shenzhen, and their goal was to reach people in every market except in mainland China. They had a dedicated team working on influencer engagement in mainland China, and that was separate from this. But we would look at ways to bring the KOLs to large-scale Huawei events, and as Ren Zhengfei said, explore the world over a cup of coffee. We would get them sitting with executives, having conversations, having small group briefings, but also then one-on-one meetings so that they could get a better sense of the company and the company could get a better sense of them. Whenever Huawei was presenting in a country, we made a special effort to reach out to KOLs in that market. So every year in Barcelona, we had a large delegation of Spanish KOLs, and we began some social media outreach in Spanish. But if you're going to an event in San Francisco, well, back when we traveled, but if you're looking at a specific market, look and start talking to and meeting up with the KOLs in that country and just start conversations. We found that we had a very active content strategy because these are hungry beasts who want a lot of content. And so you're going to have to continually create new ways of finding engaging information to retain their interest. And of course, they can receive your press releases, but it's more the executive interviews, the insights behind the technology and development, as well as some of the important corporate announcements, whether those are financial results, etc. With the we needed to, I mentioned to you all of the story ideas, fact sheets, video, B-rolls, white papers, infographics, you name it. But also I found that the KOLs became content generation machines themselves. We would go to an event and we would have Facebook Live sessions that they would be organizing so that we could start talking directly with their audience. They would be sharing imagery and infographics they developed that explained some of the news. We would work with them on breaking news and, of course, all of the hashtags, and if you're at a large conference, all of the Twitter names of everyone who's presenting, and then working with them on scheduling other content offline during the course of the year. So I've mentioned a few times the idea of the delegations, whether there is live sharing that can be held, whether we're getting them on, we've had them on video testimonials, we had KOL specific events that became information sharing and best practice. What I also liked is how some of the fledgling KOLs joined the group and expanded their network and became more influential as the larger followers started sharing their content, and influencers began to see Huawei as a great way to expand their reach and their influence. So we also became, it got to a point where when we were hosting one of these events, Huawei would be trending globally on Twitter because of the size of the impact. By not setting minimum standards for how much quantity KOLs would share, they wound up sharing way beyond what we expected. I mean, literally tweets and updates several times an hour over the course of 3 days became quite challenging. Community engagement and community management is perhaps the biggest and most important job when you're getting involved with KOLs, because each of these people are individuals with strong networks, and they want to know that they've got someone who's helping them out. So you have to nurture and grow and sometimes prune and other times evolve. You might start with a KOL who just maybe changes their direction in terms of the content they're sharing or the audience they're interested in, or they don't have the style that works well, so you just move on. And there are times KOLs come and say they didn't want to be involved them any longer. But about it, it really requires consistency and effort. I say here, you get what you schedule. And if you're not scheduling it, it ain't gonna happen. So that's kind of thinking through as part of your content calendar during the course of a year. Think about where are the opportunities for KOL engagement, what is the news that's truly going to interest them, and you have to just keep it going and going and going. So it's not always easy. We had some challenges. So when you have high profile KOLs, you sometimes have high profile problems. We had an influencer who was from South Africa, and Donald Trump said that whenever it rains in Africa, people go inside the house, and it was just a horrible comment. I don't know. And this person shared it, and LOL'd it amongst their Twitterverse, and we had to part ways. And we basically said that we've got a different style, and we weren't able to work together any longer. We also had a KOL who was pinned in the Me Too scandal a few years back, and it was a challenging time because that person's reputation came under fire, and we too then had to kind of talk through how and why we selected and worked with different KOLs. We didn't choose to part company with this KOL, but they gave up their KOL duties. We also had an interesting situation where we invited a KOL to an event, and he was a former telco minister from the country of Chile, and the opposition, they turned out to be in direct conflict with the current government, and the Huawei Chile wanted to know why this leader who wasn't in power was at a Huawei event sharing information about Huawei, and the government was asking questions. So you'll really need to vet each and every person carefully, but no matter what you do, you're always going to have trouble, so you have to be prepared and manage it with transparency and honesty. Please, if you do have questions, drop them in the chat on the side of your screen. I will be glad to answer any questions. So I'll start my Q&A in a few minutes. So measuring ROI, boy, it's challenging. There were a lot of discussions and no end result in terms of what was the measurement of good, what was the single measurement. So you wind up creating a package of ROI. So we looked at the incremental gain of influencer relations coverage versus the cost of that same amount of coverage for if you were to do paid promotion. And of course, PR versus advertising, very different. But again, you come back to that. Benchmark against competition. I was talking with people at Cisco and other technology companies about their program and the way they measured it. We looked at shares, click-through rates, page views, but more and more we came back, why are we doing this? Which is the goal to create long-term vital relationships with the company. So when you're thinking about ROI, of course, you'll want a blend of quantitative and qualitative measures. We would do at the conclusion of each event a survey of the KOLs involved and put together a pack of their coverage. It was shocking. I mean, at one event during the course of 4 days, Huawei had 7 million mentions. So it just shows the power that this can get. And I don't think 7 million mentions was ever an ROI, but it was an outcome you could qualify. So finally, I guess I just want to say is some of the things I learned. I had expected cynicism, negativity, difficulties when working with KOLs, and I never experienced that. We had one slightly negative article come out of this, and of course, having not had that experience before, a lot of the senior leaders were very surprised, but that was it. Over the course of a multi-year program to have a single negative article. I found the challenge was these KOLs are very demanding. It's 24/7. And when you're working with KOLs around the world in different time zones, as you're trying to wrap up your day, people are just kicking off. So it's a little bit difficult. And look, there I am with a delegation of international KOLs at an event in Paris. Now to obviously reduce the expense of this kind of trip, we worked a lot with European KOLs on this, but there were one or two. The woman with the white around her neck that's Tamara McCleary, who I'd mentioned earlier, who came from the US. So, these people would invest their time and energy, and we would reward them with great experiences, but also phenomenal content that worked very well with their audience. So that's my presentation. I have enjoyed, hope you have enjoyed that. We've got 2 or 3 minutes left, and I'm happy to take any questions and to answer any questions you've got. There's while you're thinking of questions, there's one last thing I wanted to share with you, and that is sorry, I do want to share just with you. It was interesting. If you look in the New York Times and search Huawei 5G Belgium, you'll see an article from January of this year about a Huawei program to reach out and work with an influencer, but then it went a little bit mad, where it appears as though Huawei created quite a large number of fake accounts in order to share, get more and more people to share information. So sadly, I had left Huawei at this time, but it just shows that you can develop some of the best campaigns, but if you approach it the wrong way, and if you ever do anything dishonest, it will be found out. So that I thought was an interesting side note. But look, that's hopefully a helpful overview of working with international KOLs for B2B brands and for longer term reputation. And if you have questions, please, you can reach me on Twitter at Facing China. I will also be joining a discussion starting in about an hour with a panel talking about managing your brand in the digital age. So there are a ton of great presenters here today, and hopefully you're enjoying your time from going around the room and across the various stages. Well, I'm staring at a countdown clock, and I really appreciate your watching. We've been able to cover off best practice in working with international social influencers while trying to work on your corporate reputation. And I hope you've enjoyed it. So thank you all very much.